So now we have the failing test that is created. So we'll start the actual implementation now in this one. So we will just click start implementation. I'll put in implementation for the name, pre-fill out the prompt that we had before, and okay, should be good to go. So it ran through the actual implementation, made a bunch of new edits, also edited the database, which I needed. And then, so it prompted to run the test, so I just had to hit allow on that a few times. And so it got all those passing. We'll check out the actual implementation in a minute. Um, so then it did check for any linting errors, which we wanted it to do, and it did have that created. And then it just gives us a summary of everything, which a lot of this stuff was explained before in our. It must be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, good. So it does have that because remember we made that little adjustment that we wanted to allow zeros. Okay, so we have that, and then we have the actual database function. Okay, so that looks good. So let's take a look at the actual code. This is the actual way that it would be done in Fast API. So it defines a class here, and this basically becomes your Pydantic model, and it has the things that we require, like the name and the age. The age has to be greater than 0, and it doesn't put defaults on those, which is good because we do want those created. Now, gender, it has to be either male or female, or it can be none. They just don't have to specify that. That's fine. And then the Grace and the Fran can be optional fields. I think that I wanted it to do every exercise. I don't know why it focused on Grace and Fran, so we'll look at that in a minute. And then it creates the actual method to, um, the actual post route to create the athlete. And then from there, it will return database.createAthlete. Again, it's focusing on Grace and Fran, which that might have been a little bit of a miscommunication with the bot. So then we go into the database, and so here's the meat and potatoes. Here's the create athlete function. Um, select. Okay, so this is how it's getting the next ID, I guess. There could be a better way, but since we're only using DuckDB right now, that's fine. And then it inserts into the athletes table all of these, and then it returns these, which this JSON here, it's going to return, and that's going to return it back to routes, and then that is going to be returned on Postman later when we test the route out. So I took another look, and so I actually specified in here that I said the user can specify scores, but I put as examples Grace and Fran, so it took that as literal that it's only Grace and Fran. What I'm doing here is I highlighted basically this whole class of the model right here, and I'm giving it another prompt clarifying that those are only examples of exercises, and we can find all of the other exercises in convert.py, which, so I haven't shown this yet, I don't think, but this little clip right here, you can use that to actually add context to what you're talking about, just so that it has a little bit more of an idea of like what it's actually doing. So it made the changes to the actual files. Now, what it did is it tried to run the test suite using the VS Code built-in extension, which we're not using. So I ended up canceling that prompt and I told it please only run the created test using UV and from the command line. So it went ahead and did that, and it found that with its newly created stuff, it did find a failure. One of the calls wasn't as expected. I did find, however, and this is the reason you need to be vigilant when using AI, I guess, so kind of a lesson in that, is that it took out the call to the database with all of the other optional workouts, and instead it just put back what it had before, which is only Grace and Fran, and it did that so that the test would end up passing again, but that's not what I want. I want it to, if the test is failing because of the additional calls, then it should update the test at that point. So I'm giving it another prompt right now and saying please add back the optional workouts to the database. And I basically copy and pasted this so that it would have some context on it. So we'll see what it does now. This time it did it correctly. If we look at the route, first of all, it put back the calls, which is what we wanted. And then secondly, if we look at test routes now, it basically edited those to end up passing it. It put in the optional parameters. Previously, it was failing because it the asserts that were the calls that were being made were not including these items here, which are included on route stop high here now. So we have that working now. I want to manually test this out now. So I need to bring up the backend, which remember we have the make file. So in here I just ran make backend, and it brought up the server, so it's listing on port 5000 now. And now I will use Postman. So in Postman, we'll go to the body tab, which I have pulled up right here. So post aware creating an actual object, right? So if we go to the raw down here and then format this as JSON is one of the options. I already did this while I was testing stuff out. I had Jane Doe age 25, that's the JSON string, specified just to show you that it will work now. We'll put John Doe instead and say he's 26. And click send. And it says that it was created at the bottom here. And you can actually expand the body of the response to see that we got back status of success, we got the new athlete ID, and it gave us a little message. Looking at the actual database, if we go to our athletes.duckdb file, and then this is like an Excel sheet at that point, we can click these to sort up and down. So if we sort for the last IDs, we see both John and Jane Doe. And then if we scroll over, we see ages 26 and 25, which are the expected ages. Alright, great. So that confirms that we have what we want. Now, let's move on to actually explaining. So this puts us on the Tutor agent, and it gives us the GPT-5 model. This now gives us a summary of what happened. So please explain the code that was implemented. So it pays attention to the implementation, not the other stuff like the actual tests, which we may want to refine the tutor to actually do, but this is fine for now, I think. Because these are very simple to understand terms. So it returns, if any exception, it logs the traceback and returns 500. The validation passes. Overall, it now safely validates incoming athlete data and passes all relevant to the database layer, while the get route retrieves existing athletes. So that was already there. Actually, I forgot that I had that route set up. So if we go to database.py where we're actually getting the athletes, so I did this just the traditional way, I guess, just coding it by hand. All I did was I just added order by athlete ID descending, so then the server automatically restarted itself, right? Because it's in watch mode. And then just bring up Postman and just run the query again. And you see that the first result we see is John Doe and he's 26, and then we see Jane Doe and she's 25. So, yeah, I guess that's another way of looking at things. We could also work on making this method a little bit more dynamic, so you can pass in more order by and stuff like that, and make it like a traditional REST API where you can get one athlete at a time and all that stuff. But that's a future goal. For right now, we implemented this whole feature going from creation to it being finished, and we can verify it in Postman. Um, as you can see, like there was a lot of refinement that we had to do with the AI to get it right. So it's definitely a useful tool, but there are definitely a lot of guardrails that are needed. Or maybe I'm just bad at prompting. Who knows? All right. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.